How are you all? Good. Warm? It's very important, I think, tonight. At least we're dry, too, which is good. Welcome to another installment of the 2022-2023 Inprint Margaret Root Brown Reading Series. Tonight featuring one of our heroes, U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. She's here with her new collection. It's a beautifully annotated retrospective titled Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light, 50 Poems for 50 Years. We are honored and happy to have Joy as our guest here in Houston, and we're thrilled that she'll be in conversation with our good friend, Texas Poet Laureate, Lupe Mendez. Yeah. This afternoon, we arranged for Joy to visit UH downtown for a presentation to students and faculty. It was fun and meaningful. Thank you, Joy. And thank you all for being with us tonight. My name is Rich Levy. I'm Executive Director of Inprint. Since 1980, the Inprint Margaret Root Brown Reading Series has presented more than 400 great writers from 38 countries, including winners of 12 Nobel Prizes, 70 Pulitzer Prizes, 65 National Book Awards, 17 Booker Prizes, as well as 21 U.S. Poets Laureate, in a series accessible to everyone. Thank you for helping to make it possible and celebrating with us the power of the written word. After tonight, we take a break for the holidays and then proudly ring in the new year on Monday, January 23rd at Congregation Emmanuel, which is near here, that way I think, at Sunset and Rice Boulevard, with two terrific authors, MacArthur Fellow Ian Lee and Inprint Fellow and UH alum Matthew Salesses, with their acclaimed new novels, The Book of Goose and The Sense of Wonder. They'll be in conversation with fiction writer and UH Creative Writing Program faculty member Brenda Peynado. Then on March 6th, we present the new U.S. Poet Laureate, Ada Limon. She's the 24th. In conversation with poet and UH Cullen Distinguished Professor Roberto Tejada. On April 17th, debut novelist and Booker Prize nominee Layla Motley, in conversation with ABC News anchor Melanie Lawson. And on May 8th, noted novelist, physician Abraham Verghese, in conversation with physician, author Ricardo Nuila, all with new work. Also in February, on the 27th, in collaboration with our friends at Decamera, we'll present a beautiful program of poetry and music in celebration of the life and work of our beloved Adam Zagievsky. Tickets and details about all of this are at inprint.org. Excuse me. In addition to the Inprint Brown Reading Series, we conduct a variety of other programs for readers, creative writers. The Inprint Book Club meets monthly to discuss authors in this series. December 11th, it's Afterlives by Nobel Prize winner Abdul Razak Gurna. We also present free of charge the Inprint Cool Brains series for middle grade readers, the Inprint Escritores en la Casa series featuring some of the world's leading authors writing in Spanish, and the Inkwell podcast, which features emerging and established Latinx and other writers of color. It's presented in collaboration with Tintero Projects and co-hosted by our friends Lupe and Jasmine Mendez. Later this week, you can listen to Jazz and Lupe's conversation with Javier Zamora, which was fantastic, so please tune in. Information on all this, plus Inprint writing workshops for aspiring writers, K-12 teachers, senior citizens, healthcare providers, inmates at the Harris County Jail, and others. the Inprint online archive of readings, our Inprint poetry buskers, and the fellowships and prizes we provide to graduate students studying creative writing. All this is on our website and more, inprint.org, where you can join our email list and follow us on social media. The Inprint Margaret Root Brown Reading Series is made possible by the invaluable support of the Brown Foundation and is named for one of its founders, and the National Endowment for the Arts. We also receive generous support from the Jerry C. Deering Family Foundation, Houston Endowment, the City of Houston through the Houston Arts Alliance, and the Texas Commission on the Arts. After Joy reads from and talks about Weaving Sundown, she'll join in conversation with Lupe Mendez, the busiest Texas poet laureate ever. He's a busy guy. Lupe is author of the collection Why I Am Like Tequila, winner of the 2019 John A. Robertson Award for Best First Book of Poetry from the Texas Institute of Letters, and is founder with Jasmine of Tintero Projects. Mendez earned his MFA at the University of Texas at El Paso. His work has appeared in, among other places, the Kenyon Review, Poetry Magazine, the LA Review of Books. He is currently on the faculty of the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts here in Houston. I think some of his students are here. Are you guys here? Are there any students here from HSPBA? All right, thank you. Good. Good. Yeah, he took note. We are thrilled that Lupe is conducting the conversation tonight. Following their talk, Joy will sign copies of Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light and her other books in the lobby. Brazos Bookstore, our wonderful bookseller since 1980, is on site offering a 10% discount on Weaving Sundown. They make great gifts. And online at brazosbookstore.com through Sunday. The discount code is Inprint. Please note that if you're in the book signing line, you have to wear a mask. In 2019, Joy Harjo was appointed the 23rd United States Poet Laureate. She was the first Native American to hold the position. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Harjo is an internationally renowned writer and performer of the Muskogee Creek Nation, author of 9 books of poetry, several plays and children's books, and 2 memoirs. Her poetry collections include An American Sunrise and Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, which Yosef Komunyaka called a marvelous instrument that veins through a dark lode of American history. Her memoir, Crazy Brave, received the PEN USA Literary Award for Creative Nonfiction and the American Book Award. Ms. Magazine called it the best kind of memoir, an unself-conscious mix of autobiography, spiritual rumination, cultural evaluation, history, political analysis, told in simple but authoritative and deeply poetic prose. She's the author of Catching the Light, published this year as part of Yale's Why I Write series, which examines the power of words and how poetry summons us toward justice and healing. Harjo is also executive editor of the anthology When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, a Norton anthology of Native Nations poetry. And she's the editor of Living Nations, Living Words, an anthology of First Peoples poetry, which is the companion anthology to her signature Poet Laureate project. It's wonderful, it's online, it's an amazing interactive map of Native poets, worth a visit to the Library of Congress website. As a musician and performer, Harjo has produced 7 award-winning albums, including her newest, I Pray for My Enemies. She's also at work on a commission for the Public Theater, We Were There When Jazz Was Invented, a play that restores Native people to the American story of blues and jazz. And she's a heck of a sax player, too. I'm just saying that. A chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, board chair of the Native Arts and Culture Foundation, first artist in residence of the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, Joy's many writing awards include the Jackson Prize, Ruth Lilly Prize, the Wallace Stevens Award, the William Carlos Williams Award. According to the Stevens Award judges, throughout her extraordinary career as a poet, storyteller, musician, memoirist, playwright, and activist, Harjo has worked to expand our American language, culture, and soul. So she's here tonight to read from and talk about this luminous new collection, Weaving Sundown in a Scarlet Light, 50 poems for 50 years. For this volume, she selected her best poems from across the years, beginning with early discoveries of her own voice, ending with moving reflections on the contemporary moment. The notes on each poem in the back of the book, which are extraordinarily generous and open, offer insight into her poetics and her life, as she takes inspiration from Navajo horse songs and jazz, reckons with home and loss, listens to the natural messengers of the earth. I have to agree with Sandra Cisneros, who calls Joy's new book, Light and Elixir, the very best prescription for us in wounded times. The collection has a lovely and intimate foreword by Sandra, which speaks of their early days as young poets at the Iowa Writers Workshop. Brief digression, I was in the undergraduate poetry workshop when they were in grad school at Iowa. It's frightening but true. In this pre-digital era, our weekly worksheets, the graduate and the undergraduate worksheets, were on bookshelves in a hallway near the workshop offices. And if Joy and Sandra were ever short worksheets, I can tell you why. Several of us undergrads stole the grad worksheets with their poems on them. It was Sandra and Joy and Rita Dove. Nobody knew who they were, but we loved the poems. Adrienne Rich says of Joy's work, I turn and return to Harjo's poetry for her breathtaking, complex witness and her world-remaking language. And Edward Hirsch writes, Harjo's poetry meaningfully transforms the American story. Her work is a long-lasting contribution to our literature. According to her interview, Joy's interview with Andrew Dansby in yesterday's Houston Chronicle, she doesn't think she will ever retire. Hey, another reason to celebrate. Please give a crazy, warm Houston welcome to this brave, essential, vital poet, Joy Harjo.
Well, Mado, thank you for welcoming me into your community that way. That was a wonderful introduction to be placed along with everyone else. I want to say, greet you in our Muskogee language, Henshe Stongo. It's really good to be here on a rainy day. We got to experience downpour Houston style. And the rain is a blessing. I was going to read the poem, Praise the Rain, but it brings more rain. And I'm not sure that's what you want. Yeah. You do need it? Okay, I might read it then. Because really, I mean, if you think of, I'm going to start with a poem called Creation Story, is that you think about the poetry's usefulness. Well, words make things happen. Your words, all of our words, you know, whether they're in a constitution or whether they're in our day-to-day life, or they're in a poem. In poetry, they become especially charged. They create our world. And so we, you know, in our Muskogee Creek community, we have poems, songs for everything. I think all of us did, and we've lost touch with that. Songs for getting up, songs for making a good grade on your paper. No, there are songs, songs to help the plants, songs for grief, songs for joy. You know, that's poetry. This is a poem, and a kind of poem in the middle. I'm not going to go through and read from the oldest to the newest. and creation story. I wrote this when a beloved poet friend passed, but it was also, I could say this poem too is about our country, which is a person. It's about a family. It's about the importance, again, of words, and how no matter what we say or what we do or how the story in the story field keeps moving, but we have to remember that it's always threaded with love, or what we call anagechka, or light. Creation story. I am not afraid of love or its consequence of light. It's not easy to say this or anything when my entrails dangle between paradise and fear. I am ashamed I never had the words to carry a friend from her death to the stars correctly, or the words to keep my people safe from drought or gunshot. The stars who were created by words are circling over this house, formed of calcium of blood, this house in danger of being torn apart by stones of fear. If these words can do anything, if these songs can do anything, I say, bless this house with stars, transfix us with love. So we've been through a lot. We're in the midst of a shifting story. We've always been in the midst of a shifting story because everything always changes. But we need points of ceremony. And we are in one. I mean, there's sunrise, sunset, the moon, all of these different cycles that we move through together, natural cycles. But there are moments when we have to kind of call our spirit back from the internet, from email land, email-landia, and all of that. And remember who we are and call our spirits back. And take time to sit by the fire and collect ourselves and to help others and to keep going. We need that for sustenance. Because even, we need, as human beings, we need food, clothing, and shelter. Well, we also need to feed our minds. We need mind field. That is nourishment, not TikTok. And although I would say not everything's good or bad, there's probably moments of that in the most creative portions of that. But we also need spiritual food. And that's where poetry too comes in. For calling the spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth gathering essences of plants to clean. Give back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth, Iganajaga, who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way. Though there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces and tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place to go. Make a giveaway. And remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. Thank you. I'll do Praise the Rain if you want more rain. I wrote this, I was in a residency up in the Northwest Coast, and it rained and rained and rained and rained. And I walked around in the rain. That was the only way you could walk around. And you know what really touched me about being up there? That's in UCB, University of British Columbia. And I've never seen this anywhere else. So there's a Native Studies department and a center there, like a longhouse center on campus. And what was really exciting is that the original keepers of those lands, the original and I don't remember the name of the tribal nation there, but they were very closely tied to the university. So students who were involved in and graduating in Native Studies would take their papers over and read to the community, and the community would have discussions. You know, they were participants and were invested in the students also and the education. I thought that was one of the best things. I haven't seen that anywhere else. But this is Praise the Rain. Praise the rain, the seagull died, the curl of plant, the raven talk. Praise the hurt, the house slack, the stand of trees, the dignity. Praise the dark, the moon cradle, the sky fall, the bear sleep. Praise the mist, the warrior name, the earth eclipse, the fired leap. Praise the backwards, upward sky, the baby cry, the spirit food. Praise canoe, the fish rush, the hole for frog, the upside down. Praise the day, the cloud cup, the mind flat, forget it all. Praise crazy, praise sad. Praise the path on which we're led. Praise the roads on earth and water. Praise the eater and the eaten. Praise beginnings, praise the end. Praise the song and praise the singer. Praise the rain, it brings more rain. Praise the rain, it brings more rain. I've learned that anything if I talk negatively, it's going to come to me, or positively. It becomes attracted to you. It's like, think of I was sitting on a plane once and I thought, well, I'm making what was I calling it? That as I was thinking, these word creations were going out into the world. But what gives them hold is poetry, or singing, or emotion. So you can make it work the other way. Sometimes it's our tendency to carry on about something, and even as we're carrying on about something negative that we don't like, we are building it. That's what poetry has taught me. One of the things it's taught me a number of things. I'm really tempted to sing Grace, but we will see. This poem came about in, I might sing part of it. I was flying over Iowa City, where I went to graduate school, and there's a wonderful introduction. I mean, Sandra Cisneros is very busy, and she has a wonderful new book of poetry out called Woman Without Shame. And I love it because at this point, what do we have to be ashamed of? You should always live as if it's your last day, you know, and it's like you get older, and especially as a woman, and she's like, what do I have to lose? I'm going to sing and speak what I want and speak the truth as a woman who is older. And so one of the best things for me to come out of Iowa was my friendship with Sandra Cisneros. And, but I was flying over, and I was thinking about, to the difficulty, I had come up in a Native community and went to school in a Native community, and there I was in Iowa where there were 7 Indian students in the whole school. And I come from a sun culture. Well, I started keeping a calendar, and there was a whole month the sun had not come out. And so this poem came after over a month, and I was sitting in a place called Perkins Cake and Steak for breakfast, and the sun came out. But I was flying over Iowa City thinking about those times, and this poem reminds me of the poet James Welch, who is also a novelist, and I always liked his sideways ways of talking. Grace. I think of wind and her wild ways, the year we had nothing to lose and lost it anyway. We still talk about that winter, how the cold froze buffalo. The haunting voices of the start broke fences, crashed our thermostat dreams. We couldn't stand it one more time. So once again we lost a winter in stubborn memory. Walked through cheap apartment walls, skated through fields of ghosts, into a town that never wanted us, in the epic search for grace. Like coyote, like rabbit, we could not contain our terror. Clowned our way through a season of false midnights. We had to swallow that down with laughter, so we would go down easy as honey. And one morning as the sun struggled to break ice, and our dreams had found us with coffee and pancakes, we found grace. I could say Grace was a woman with time on her hands, or a white buffalo escaped from memory. But in that dingy light, it was a promise of balance. We once again understood the talk of animals, and spring was lean and hungry with the hope of children and corn. I would like to say with grace, we picked ourselves up and walked Into the spring thaw we didn't. The next season was worse. You went home to work with the tribe and I went south. There is something larger than the memory of a dispossessed people. And when I am still crazy, and one morning as the sun struggled to break ice, we found grace. Well, see, that little problem with memory always, memory is tricky. So, let's see. So that's a little bit older one. I'm going to read this one. It's about history. And you can embed history in a love poem. And I wrote this when I was writing an American Sunrise, the book American Sunrise, and which I wrote when I was, my husband and I went down to Knoxville, Tennessee I took on a position down there at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And we also went because those are our homelands all over of our Muskogee people, all down in the southeast, into Alabama, Georgia, Florida, that whole area. So we were driving around and even seeing homes where our families had lived in that area. And that book came when I knew we were leaving, and I thought, you know, what do you do with contradictions? I mean, we all have contradictions, every one of us, and we're all living in a contradiction of history. What do you do with that? And I remember thinking, our people fought, in our family, we have stories of family members who fought fiercely against our removal. It'd be like you being forced to move by gunpoint out of your homes. And we had been forcibly moved. Our people did not want to, you know, our homelands, our trees, our rivers, the animals, the origin story, where the origin stories were planted. And here we were excited about going back home, which was the place our families were forced to. And what do you do with that contradiction? Because though we were there and the stories were there and we were heartsick, our people were now in Oklahoma. And what do you do with that? That's how I came to write An American Sunrise. Well, this is one of the poems in there, and all through that book, I'm looking at history. And this poem is a love poem for my husband, Owen, who's here with me, Owen Sapopa. And, but I was thinking, it's called My Man's Feet. And about how, you know, there's history. I mean, the feet we were force marched into Indian territory. But in this poem are layers of history, the layers of history of the mound builders, the mound builder culture, which goes all the way down into Mexico, Central America, South America, and you know, the Spanish galleon, stagecoaches. It's all here. My man's feet. They are heroic roots. You cannot mistake them for any other 6-foot walker. I could find them in a sea of feet, a planet or universe of feet. They kicked the sky at birth in that town his great-grandfather found. My man's feet left childhood past the mineral grit of an oil flush bust to these atomic eastbound lands. His feet are made of his mother's spiritual concern and of his father historic and mindfully upright. What walkers, from mound builder steps that led to the sky maker, past Spanish galleon, stagecoach, and railroad snaker. One generation following another, no other feet but these could bear the rock-stubborn, loyal bear, towering intelligence and children picker-upper. That is the one who owns these feet. What an anchor his feet provide for his unmatched invincibility and get-up-again-ality. I've danced behind this man in the stomp dance circle, our feet beating rhythm together, man, woman, boy, girl, sun and moon jumper. My man's feet are the sure steps of a father looking after his sons, his daughters. For when he laughs, he opens all the doors of our hearts, even as he forgets to shut them when he leaves. And when he grieves for those he loves, he carves out valleys enough to hold everyone's tears with his feet, these feet, my man's widely humble, ever steady, beautiful, brown feet. Okay, I guess I can read a couple more, and then I get to hang out with Lupe and you guys with Q&A. I'll read two short ones. Well, I'll read this sunrise. I'll read sunrise and then end with without. And sunrise is a point of gathering energy together. When the sun is our star, it's light. And the elders tell you, the older people at least told us, I guess some of us are the elders now, is that it's important to be up at that time and to gather light and then to send it in prayers and songs and language out to bless the day, bless the earth, bless each other as on this path we are together in this story field, because it's not easy. It's not easy for any of us. Although we might look at somebody and think they have it easier, but we gather that light and then it goes out, because that's the sun. It's a power that is growing. And then sunset is a good time to let it go. Think of all those things you said you might have regretted. Let go anything that you've been carrying for days, for years. Just let it go as the sun goes. And we'd be a lot healthier that way, just to let it go. Sunrise. And this is about after one of those long nights when you need the sun. You're waiting for the sun to illuminate. Sunrise, as you enter the houses of everyone here, find us. We've been crashing for days, or has it been years? Find us beneath the shadow of this yearning mountain, crying here. We have been sick with sour longing and the jangling of fears. Our spirits rise up in the dark because they hear doves in cottonwoods calling forth the sun. We struggled with a monster and lost. Our bodies were tossed in the pile of kill. We were ashamed, and we told ourselves for 1,000 years we didn't deserve anything but this. And one day, in relentless eternity, our spirits discern movement of prayers carried toward the sun. And this morning, we are able to stand with all the rest and welcome you here. We move with the lightness of being, and we will go where there's a place for us. And finally, the poem Without. This poem ends the collection. And I was trying to write a poem for a brother-in-law who he loved very much, who passed from COVID. It's hard to write those kinds of poems, you know. It's difficult to write them. And this wasn't the poem I wound up writing for him. This is one that I wrote along the way to find the right poem for him and for the family. But I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how this world will continue, how this country will continue, how our families will continue given all of the assaults of against race, against women, against, our children dealing with, what is it, fentanyl now, and we've got meth, and just thinking about how will we all make it through? And thinking about what kind of story is this, and yet always believing in that thread of love that goes through everything. Sometimes I have to believe that the story we're in it's all in a way as it should be. We're all here together, and we're all making this story filled together. The world will keep trudging through time without us when we lift from the story contest to fly home. We will be as falling stars to those watching from the edge of grief and heartbreak. Maybe then we will see the design of the two-minded creature and know why half the world fights righteously for greedy masters, and the other half is nailing it all back together through the smoke of cooking fires, lovers' trysts, and endless human industry. Maybe then, beloved rascal, we will find each other again in the timeless weave of breathing. We will sit under the trees in the shadow of earth's sorrows, watch hyenas drink rain, and laugh. Okay.
Another round of applause for Joy Harjo. A true blessing to be able to spend time with you today through dinner, and to be able to sit and discuss this amazing, beautiful career and work. Just a few questions to go over. Before we start, Rich, do you still have those copies of those poems you took when you were an undergrad? Because those are priceless, sir.
Actually, Sandra included one in the introduction.
Oh, that's right. At the very beginning, there's a snippet of one of the poems.
Yes, we were asked to write a poem together in our class.
Would you mind reading just that small piece?
Yes. She says, in seminar class, Joy and I teamed up for a collaborative assignment and wrote this poem together during this season. The title says it all, Permission to Speak, because we didn't feel we had that. Lately, I've turned to the river, to the starlings gathering there at twilight, moon in their throats. All I want is the music, anything to keep me breathing, this dancing, this whirl of my heart.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely.
And I don't know which lines are Sandra's or mine at this point.
Beautiful. Which kind of leads to the first question I had thought of. As Sandra has begun that beginning forward, that lovely forward, she mentions that there was a moment when you were into visual arts, mm-hmm. and then shifted into the world of poetry. And then later she discusses and talks through, and having heard that you've delved into music and song and the singing. What called to you to make those moves? And then to the grander idea, how have each of those mediums left an echo of themselves in you?
Yeah, I had no plans to be a poet. There was no context for, poet as a career or as, a path for a life to make a living with children. I was always an artist, and I was not a speaker or I was not a word person, although I read constantly. I was always reading, and I love poetry and I love music. And I was always doing art. I got accepted at the Institute of American Indian Arts, which was a Bureau of Indian Affairs art high school and 2 years postgraduate in the late 60s when I went there for high school. And I got in with my art. And I wound up after a few shifts at the University of New Mexico in art. And I didn't need to use words. I was not a person, I'm sociable, but I liked painting. I've always liked a lot of space. I do best when I have a lot of quiet and space, and where I can just be. And I get out of balance when I don't have it. And I started hearing poetry. You know what it was that suddenly I met native poet. I was hearing native poetry for the first time, really. At Indian school, there were students who wrote poetry, and it's almost like everybody would write notes. I wrote really silly limericks about teachers and got put into a class by myself. My English class was by myself. But, you know, as far as becoming a poet or writing, that didn't figure into my life. But when I heard native poets and heard that they were writing about our lives, but in these small, well-crafted little moments, that I started writing. And it took over, and it was quite a struggle. I had quite a struggle within myself because I knew how I could fit with native art. My grandmother, Naomi Harjo, was a painter. I had her paintings. We had her paintings in our home. And my Aunt Lois, who was my closest relative, you know, she was a painter and taught art and had a shop with native arts. You know, that was my world. And the poetry thing just totally, I had no idea, but it became, I don't understand it except that it became a way, it was a calling. And I don't know how to explain it because I don't feel like I really chose it. It's not, oh, I'm going to do this. People ask, when did you decide to become a poet? I don't know that I decided. I think it just took over because, and I started, there was just something there and I kept following it. It made no sense at all. I did have children to bring up alone. But I also trusted it. It was a very strong, my poetry spirit is very strong. It's the same voice in the saxophone. It's that same voice. And the music was always a part of the poetry because I came up with my mother who wrote songs and liked to, and was a singer until she had 4 children and it all went away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your poetry covers so much richness and lingering moments, both that are super quiet and then absolutely explosive. Is there a poem that you feel that you have yet to finish, or an idea that you haven't covered in all these years of time and letters?
I would have to think about that. I think that every one of us has themes and obsessions. You don't have to be an artist or poet. We all, in our lives, every family has something to work out together. Right. Family themes that are different from each family. Countries are like that. Nations are like that. And I think a predominant theme is transformation. How do you turn hatred into love? How do you turn what could destroy you into something that can be a ladder towards Anagechka or love or understanding? But I don't know, there's always something just ahead. Artists are about exploring or listening and feeling out a direction of where we might go or what's ahead that not everybody can see. And you may not even understand what you're doing, but you're there really I consider myself a kind of messenger. And I just take care of things. I sit down and I have to construct a nice place for what's coming through to live.
Yeah.
It's something like that.
Yeah. You mentioned that, and I think I just turned to the poem, I Give You Back. which you wrap up so well in this idea of accepting what's that thing that's the cause of potential pain and fear, and accepting it and putting it back out so that it does no longer live as that. So well spoken. What does the works that are in this particular collection mean to you overall? Are there any of the poems that have changed over the years in its meaning for you?
Yeah, I'd have to. Well, they kind of grow. Some of them are like friends that have accompanied. You know, I realized. I know I can't. Stop me if I say you know. Yeah. So I realized that looking back, I realized that what comes through, if there's wisdom that comes through, it was larger than me, and that the poets, I said I accepted sitting here and writing them so that whatever it is could come through, and they've accompanied me, and they keep teaching me, like the poem Remember has been with me for almost as long as I've been writing, and I still learn from it. As I was saying, you don't always know exactly what you're doing, and people will write to you, students, what does this poem mean? Well, it can mean a number. I always write back, when I can, I get so busy, and I always say, one, it's not my place as the poet to tell you what it means. That's not the point. The point is the experience of the poem, the language, and innately it's going to be embedded with meaning. Of course, you can read a poem through many different lenses, and it will have a meaning in different ways.
Yeah, very true. So as you have all the poems that are in here, you've gone through the process of picking out what those pieces are, and then you sit down to do the work of creating the notes section for each of the poems. Mm-hmm. What was that process like? Was that, it wasn't all in one sitting, of course, but was it lots of thinking through, or were some notes quicker to be able to pen together quicker? Or how did it feel to be able to go back and create the notes for these poems?
Well, I remember, so these notes, having notes at the end is part of a longer process. When I published the book, The Woman Who Fell from the Sky, that book is my attempt to show that even a written book of poetry is an event of virality. So what I included in that poem were little moments, like, so you heard me when I was reading, I usually tell little stories or relate something, and it's not to explain the poem, it's to give context or to give something for the poem to to open it up a little, but not to explain the poem. And so that was my attempt, and that book came out with a cassette tape that tells you how old it is, and with some music on it, with the poems, but it was like, what is orality? I remember thinking about how at Indian school, most of our student population was there. They came from communities that were still immersed in orality, where people used and understood and know that the stories are alive, and that the songs are alive, and that it's alive. We're in a living universe, and everything is alive. So, and that's orality. When you speak, this is much better than Zoom, thank you. It's living. And I wanted that in a book. I wanted the book to translate that way. Well, I don't know that anybody got that. And so I did it again with a map to the next world, and the stories got longer, and they were after the point, they were like in between. And I did it 3 different ways in that book. I did that form in the whole book. I did a poem in sections that went back and forth that way. And then I did a poem in The Beautiful Perfume and Stink of the World. That, I like that title. My editor nixed it for the title of the book. But did the same thing in a poem. And then How We Became Human, I put a little few notes. But then An American Sunrise also continues that idea of orality about how maps and history, stories of history are all through what we do as artists and as human beings at different levels. We're always engaged with history in some way or the other. So that book includes historical accounts, words of people who on the Trail of Tears, or people who survived the Trail of Tears into Indian Territory, as well as poetry, and then some commentary. So that extended it. And so this collection, I put the notes in the back, which is not to explain the poems, but to give you sometimes even a historical context, or the notes sometimes don't have anything exactly to do with the poem. They're just kind of a jumping off place to think about.
A rumination of it, yeah.
Yeah, just something a little bit different.
For it. That's good.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. In the many years you've had to write these brilliant concepts, has the action of writing a poem changed for you? Is poetry an old friend or a new conversationalist that you get to sit with?
I think it's both. I think the poetry spirit has a lot of friends, you know? There's muses, I guess there's that concept of muses, but I think I've always felt like this poetry voice is very particular. And I've tried to veer from it, I have, and it doesn't work. I remember at the Iowa Writers Workshop thinking I should write like everyone else because, you know, Rich was talking about the worksheets. Sandra and I didn't get on the worksheet for a whole month in our first workshop. Everybody was getting their poems on there with every week or two, and we weren't getting on there. And I started thinking, well, I must be writing poetry wrong. And so I tried writing like everyone else. Of course, that was not compelling, and it was not me, and I stopped it before too long because it was not, I thought, why do it? And so then I decided just to write the way that I write. And so you get to know that, I don't know if you call it a spirit, but it's a presence, or that it becomes like, I wouldn't even say friend. It's a kind of force that teaches you and challenges you. And sometimes if you're not taking good care of it, it goes away. But I have found interference. If you talk about how it's changed, when I started writing, you know, I always write longhand too. I've got all kinds of notebooks, but I will take things to the computer, or I used to type. You know, I'm a real rhythm oriented, so that was cool, you know. But, you know, it's typing.
Yeah.
But, and then you do drafts. I always do drafts and keep the drafts. It was much more kinetic. And then going to the computer, that kind of shifts it a little. But I find that it's almost, I've thought about getting a typewriter again, because you get on the computer and then there's everything comes at you. And I know you can go into the focus mode, which I do sometimes. But even having the phone nearby is interference. And I don't like that, and I think it's gotten in my way. I feel that it's gotten in my way of it's broken up my thinking. And I went off TikTok when I love my dream world. I learn a lot, and I travel and hear things and write down pieces of songs. I mean, a lot comes to me that way. And when, about a month or two ago, when in the middle of the deepest dreams where you just go into it, and there you are in the story field, here were those songs from TikTok and all this. And no, it was breaking up consciousness. That's what was happening. Mm-hmm. And that's what it does, so that you cannot pay attention. It cuts your attention. It cuts your story gathering. It cuts it into little pieces. So there's not the depth that, say, in the people, my generation, the generation before, where people would sit in like circles, and the stories could go all night. That's a very different, and you go into places that almost beyond comprehension, the deepest storytelling or the deepest song making, where people know songs and can sing them back and forth to these little quips. It's almost like Barbie cereal quips. you know, it's like that. And so I trying to move out of, I turned that off because I want my dreams. You know, we have a collective dream going too, all of us. There is a collective dreaming. I think there's a generational dreaming. I think of a generation coming in as a person. And what happens when we do not have those times to be together, to sit, listen, dance together, share food, but listen, and to talk about this instead of, you know, the false story culture, or shouting, or carrying guns into voting booths, or, you know, whatever.
Right.
What happens? Then people, if we don't have the stories of each other, then we're just an image on a screen, and you can, you know, kids shoot each other, kill each other. People are, you know, it turns into that. And that's not what we want for ourselves or our children or our grandchildren or great-grandchildren. That is not our destiny.
I think back to an idea one of my elders told me was, when you are dreaming of someone else, you have been in conversation for them the day before or the day soon to come. Mm-hmm. And so I think about that idea, the communal dreaming, the communal thought that occurs in a space and within people. So absolutely right. What does it mean to you to have this magnificent work out in the world, to having been the U.S. Poet Laureate at this point? Earlier, Rich alluded to the fact that you said that you didn't think you were going to retire, you were going to keep going. How does that, now that you've been able to accomplish the works that you've been able to do with both your project, what becomes the next thing that you maybe are thinking of working on?
Time out. Yeah.
A nice break.
Yeah, no, it's you know, sometimes it takes a while. The way I work, sometimes it takes a while for something to really process, for me to really see or even know and truly understand what I've been part of, whether it's history or even this book, 50 Poems in 50 Years, or letting go like the Poet Laureateship. I was Poet Laureate for 3 years during some very interesting and tough times in this country. And my last events were the last week of April, but once Ada Limon was announced, and I realized that week I had to realize I finally felt the burden of it. I mean, I just keep going. And then I finally felt letting it go. What a burden. And just being asked this question about this, I'm thinking 50 poems, 50 years. You know, I could let it go at this point. I mean, I feel like I've fulfilled one part of what I was put here to do, but there's another whole round
of things to do.
Yes, I mean, I've got a musical I'm working on, etc., but it's even something that there's something more I was put here to do, but I cannot keep running around like wildly like I used to. You know? Right. I want to keep going, and I need, again, that kind of space, that kind of dreaming. I call it dreaming, and a lot of people think of dreams as just, dreaming is profound. It is profound. You think about it, we spend a lot of our time dreaming. And it's profound building material. You know?
Like the dreaming and the wishing and the world that we build inside and out, yes.
Yeah, with the words, even our thought forms.
Yeah, very much so. From your perspective, how has the poetry world changed from the time that you've been at Iowa to now being on this stage?
Oh, wow. Well, it's gone to being, I think when we were coming up as poets, we published in literary magazines. Almost everything's gone digital. I remember I liked being able to go by a newsstand and see all these magazines and peruse them and physically go through them, and it's not like that. Everything is digital. I don't know that I like the availability that the digital, I like being able to have certain kinds of access, but that has changed. I think that's changed quite a bit, so that most of the publishing, I would guess a lot of the publishing is digital, but we still have Brasso's books. Books are still very important, I think. People still like that physicality of having, being able to sit with
A book in their hand.
Yes.
Walking into bookstores and perusing, that still exists. Very true, very true. And then...
But there's more to that question, and I don't know that I can really answer that right now, because I think poets are poets. I think one difference is all the native poets that we see now that are part of the national scene. That was not the case when I was coming up as a poet. Even the best native poets, you would not see them, and the best Chicano poets or Hispanic, you didn't see us. You didn't see us in the national, being published by the big publishers for the most part. We weren't able to cross that threshold. It was very rare and did not do it very easily. And I think that has changed. There's still struggles.
Correct.
But now we have Natalie Diaz, Layli Long Soldier, there's Sherwin Bitsui. That's changed. We have more of a voice.
A beautiful change.
Yeah.
This last question. So everybody else, hang on. You mentioned this earlier, just for a quick second. What does rest look and feel like for you?
When you said rest, I thought immediately of a rest in a musical score.
That too.
I don't know why, but I did.
rest?
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
That's what I saw was like a whole rest sitting there. And I need to remember what it looks like to me. It looks like it's absolutely necessary for sound to even have a shape. You need rest. You have to have those places of silence or rest. And yes, I'm at that place where I need a little bit of rest. But I also believe the best, I always think that I'm going to be doing my best work. I'll have plenty of time to rest after I'm dead.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Ladies and gentlemen, Joy Harjo.
Thank you.
Lovely.
And Lupe Mendez.